Hey, what's up y'all? Today's video is going to be all about shot cancellation. I gotta give y'all a heads up, shot cancellation isn't fully understood even after all the time that has passed since this game released. In the future, I'll have to update this video if any new information is ever discovered, so with that being said, you should subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss any future Icarus Uprising videos. Like many things in Icarus Uprising, shot cancellation is never fully explained and is only mentioned in loading screens, and is vaguely worded in weapon idle descriptions as strong potential for nullifying enemy fire. So what is shot cancellation? Shot cancellation is a value that's attached to every ranged attack in the game. This value can be as low as 1 or as high as 7 without the help of the shot cancellation modifier. But we'll talk about that in a bit. So depending on how low or high your value of shot cancellation your attack is versus incoming fire, there are two scenarios that can happen. Example A, both shots equally cancel each other out and dissipate. And in example B, one shot beats out the other, but not only that, the shot that wins will still be active and will deal damage. So in true Sakurai game fashion, there are no number values you can check in the game for this complicated mechanic. Fortunately, the competitive community from back in the day made a shot cancellation spreadsheet. So just for the sake of showing you how to read the spreadsheet, I'm going to go over the Crusader Blade range moveset as a quick example. So there are two columns we need to look for. One of them named SC, which is our shot cancellation value. The other column named Stamina is basically our shot health. To keep this short and sweet, the higher both of these values are, the better your shot cancellation is. In general gameplay, I'd recommend only worrying about your weapon's SC value because it's a lot easier to remember that, but not only that, the only reason is because as far as I'm aware, no one knows how the shot health stat is calculated when two shots collide. So yeah, before I move on, let me just go over the shot cancellation +1 weapon modifier. Just in case you were wondering, there's only a +1, there's no higher level version of this modifier. What this weapon modifier does is increase the SC value of your range attacks by a value of 1. So why is this important? This is important because having this modifier can make the difference between having scenario example A or example B happen. In general, weapons that have range attacks with slow travel speed and that are also easier to spot benefit greatly from this weapon modifier. As you can imagine given that description, clubs are a great example of this, specifically their dash charge shots. The reason for this is because overall, club dash charge shots are extremely unsafe due to the sheer amount of startup and end lag of each dash charge shot animation, which can leave you exposed to attacks if your shot is cancelled out. To add insult to injury, club dash charge shots also, for some weird balancing reason, lack shot health, which only makes it easier for your shots to be cancelled out. Before I forget, the only downside to having the shot cancellation +1 modifier is that it actually costs a lot of value to have on, which could have been utilized instead to have more modifiers or stars on your weapon. Oh yeah, and one last thing before we move on. Remember that the SC value can vary from a value of 1 to 7 naturally. Fortunately, there are only 2 weapons in the game that have a 7 SC value naturally, and those 2 weapons are the Guardian Orbitars and the Pudgy Palm. More specifically, all of Guardian Orbitar's dash charge shots, and lastly, Pudgy Palm's backward dash charge shot. So, if you had the shot cancellation +1 mod on either of these weapons, you would have access to a shot with an overkill shot cancellation value of 8. So how does this mechanic work? To be blunt, we won't have a definitive answer on how this mechanic works until we have someone look into the game's code, but until that happens, the best I can do is give you an educated guess. So with that being said, between our two example scenarios, in particular example A, where both shots cancel each other out, is the most straightforward to understand. So I'll go over this scenario first. So based on my lab testing, this is a result of both shots having the same shot cancellation value regardless of shot health difference and base damage difference. A shot with higher shot cancellation gets pelted with enough lower cancel shots that its shot health gets reduced to 0. A shot with a lower cancel value but a higher base damage versus a shot with a higher shot cancel value but lower base damage. So yeah, for some reason base damage is relevant to shot cancellation, Basically, base damage is what your weapon deals if it were a 100 value weapon. So from what I think I understand, your base damage has influence over how good your shot cancellation is during the lifespan of a shot, depending on if your weapon deals more damage from a distance or in close quarters. So if your weapon deals more damage from a distance, that means that your cancellation is at its strongest at maximum range and is weaker the closer you are to your target. The opposite seems to check out for weapons that deal more damage in close quarters and weaken over distance. Since this is based off your weapon's base damage, damage enhancing modifiers like dash charge shot don't do anything as far as I've experienced. The shot range modifier, however, does seem to have an influence over this. So here's a clip as an example. So just to give some context to this situation, the Dark Pit Staff forward dash charge shot is able to deal 100 plus base damage at max range, with the max range being 110 meters away. As far as I've tested, 100 base damage is a magical number to cancel out Guardian Orbitars, which are the king of shot cancellation. The map is set to Small Arena, which is definitely smaller than 110 meters across, which means that my default range Dark Pit Staff will never be able to cancel out Guardian Orbitar dash charge shots. This all changes when I use a Dark Pit Staff with the shot range -3 modifier. My new maximum range on forward dash charge shot with this new Dark Pit Staff is now 66 meters away. So now I'm barely able to reach my 100 plus base damage, which results in me being able to cancel out the Guardian Orbitar dash charge shots. In conclusion, the shot range modifier can be utilized this way because it affects how your base damage is distributed across your new range. So depending on if your weapon deals more damage up close or from afar, you might benefit from not having this weapon modifier on at all. In the case of a weapon that deals max damage in close quarters, with the shot range plus modifier, you will be extending your minimum damage to your new shot range. And in the case of a weapon that deals maximum damage at long range, with the shot range plus modifier, you will be extending the distance required for your maximum damage while also dealing less damage at more common ranges. There's one thing in particular I want to mention, the shot range negative modifier. I'd strongly recommend only using it on stabs. The only issue with this is that most stabs that this would be godlike on can't actually have a shot range negative modifier on at all. So this particular build would only be viable with the Dark Pit Staff, Scorpio Staff, and Thanatos Staff in my opinion. So now that I went over the existence of base damage Witchcraft, we can now go over my theory of why Scenario B occurs, which is when one shot beats out the other and is still able to deal damage. So based off of what I've experienced in the testing lab, you need to have a shot cancel difference, but not only that, you also need a higher base damage over the shot you are canceling against. The exact base damage difference required to guarantee a shot cancels through another is a question we won't have an answer to without someone data mining the game. So here's a clip of an Arum Club with the shot cancel +1 mod failing to cancel through my darkness bow. So on paper, this Arum Club absolutely outclasses me both in shot cancel value and shot health, so you would think this would cancel through, but the Darkness Bow has the stronger base damage resulting in an equal cancel. So now let's go to the next clip, Crusader Blade versus Orb Staff. Comparing standing charge shot stats, the Crusader Blade is at a shot cancel disadvantage, but shot health is the exact same. At a distance, the Orb Staff has the base damage advantage, which results in the Orb Staff cancelling through the Crusader Blade. I'd like to mention that this might be the reason why dash continuous fire is generally an unsafe option, as you don't have the protection of a dash charge shot due to the major difference in cancellation value and base damage, while also sharing the same end lag and startup of one. Something weird happens if I bring the Crusader Blade closer to the Orb Staff. Both shots seem to just ignore each other and both players get hit. I swear, Sakurai glued this mechanic together with black magic. So to wrap up this section, this mechanic is absolutely overwhelming. So I strongly recommend only worrying about shot cancellation value difference versus the shot you're trying to cancel. It's way easier to remember as it's only one number to keep in mind versus multiple varying numbers. From my experience, you'll get the hang of using this mechanic to your advantage over time as you play Uprising multiplayer. So, how do you apply this to your gameplay? This is going to depend on how much matchup knowledge you have, as well as how much risk you're willing to take. And to elaborate, I'll be going over the options you have normally when you have to deal with incoming fire. Your list of options goes as follows: evading, shock cancellation, and lastly, powers. Let's go over evading first. While this seems like the obvious option to take, your ability to dodge is actually quite limited if you don't have the evasion plus weapon modifier. Basically, with your default invincibility frames you get from your dodging, you have to be cautious about the direction you dodge certain types of shots. For example, club charge shots are usually so big that you can't dodge them head on, and will result in you receiving heavy damage if dodged incorrectly. In the case of some weapons with extremely powerful homing, so much in fact that they'll loop around you, are generally impossible to evade without the evasion plus weapon modifier, which increases the amount of invincibility frames you receive when dodging. To summarize this, unless you have at least +3 evasion, your option to dodge depends on what weapon you're up against, which leads us into our other option, shock cancellation. Alright, so just before we start talking about shock cancellation, I want to first borrow some fighting game terminology, just because I'm tired of saying example A or B. So for example A, where both shots cancel each other out, we're going to call this neutral cancel, or neutral on cancel. And for example B, where one shot beats out the other, we're going to call this plus on cancel if your shot wins, or minus on cancel if your shot loses. Alright, now with that out of the way, let's talk about how you can implement shock cancellation into your gameplay. This is going to sound weird, but you should think of your charge shots as a combination of sword and shield, offense and defense. Now obviously your shots deal damage, but in Uprising there is no shield button like there is in Smash Bros, and this is where you can get creative and use your own charge shots as a shield. For example, if you have a hard time dodging a shot, assuming you are at least neutral on cancel, you can just send out your shot to neutralize your enemy's fire. Shock cancellation used in this manner is extremely effective in stalling for time if you are playing as your team's Angel on Light vs Dark, so you should definitely keep this option in mind. You can also use this offensively to approach if needed, as you're basically forcing a stalemate to close in the distance. There is a risk in using shock cancellation as a shield in general, and that heavily depends on how fast your weapon's frame data and charge time is versus your opponent's. I'll go into powers as an option in a bit, but I do want to briefly mention that you can fix your charge times temporarily with the quick charge power. Unfortunately, there's no fix for slow frame data, so you have to be cautious around weapons that can shoot faster than you, which is usually the case when it comes to using something like a club against an arm, if I had to give an example. Now, if you recall from earlier, I basically said that being neutral on cancel is the easiest to use. The reason for this is because you only have to keep track of the SC value of the incoming fire, so if you're up against something with a 4 shock cancellation value, you'd only have to make sure that you also have a 4 shock cancellation value. Outside of a handful of weapons, you don't have to worry about memorizing the cancellation value of continuous fire, since they have lower shock cancellation value compared to charged shots. So realistically, you only have to keep track of charged shot SC values to use this effectively. So now, let's go over being plus on cancel. You are basically at a massive advantage just because you can wait for your opponents to pick an option and fire at the same time as them, and almost guarantee your attack lands since they'll be stuck in the startup or end lag of their attack. There's not really much to say about being at this advantage state other than if your opponent is making a mistake, you don't have to adapt your playstyle at all, since it's up to your opponent to adapt to your playstyle, whether it be through dodging or using powers, because cancellation isn't an option anymore when you're minus on cancel. Now, because being minus on cancel is extremely dangerous, it should go without saying that you shouldn't even attempt to go up against someone that has a clear advantage over you, if you can help it. This is a perfect time to go over your third option, and that is using powers. If you haven't already seen my multiplayer guide video where I briefly go over this topic, there are some powers that grant you invincibility frames upon activation, with the most well-known one being Celestial Fireworks. So with that being said, you can use powers to take advantage of their invincibility frames to dodge what you couldn't evade naturally. You can also cover for your lack of being unable to cancel out shots as well, although your selection of powers that can actually achieve this are quite small, but I'll list them off now. So the list goes as follows, and that is Rocket Jump, Angelic Missile, and lastly Meteor Shower. With the exception of Rocket Jump, these powers grant some form of invincibility, deal damage, and even cancel out enemy fire. I'd also like to give an honorable mention to Reflect Barrier, as this is such a useful tool when you're back up against a wall. Reflect Barrier is an amazing defensive power to use, as this reflects back enemy fire, which can net you a kill if your opponent is careless. And on top of all of that, it also grants you invincibility frames. So now that we briefly went over the pros of using powers, which is the fact that they can cover your two options, which are evading and cancellation, the only limitation that is applicable to power usage is the fact that they're a resource that can only be replenished upon dying, which is perfectly fine for free-for-all. However, in the case for light versus dark, powers should be used wisely if you're at risk of being the angel, as you can unknowingly sabotage yourself if you drained your power uses before you transformed into the angel, resulting in you only having a few charges of power to use as your team's angel, which can potentially cut your life short, resulting in a fast loss for your team. As a side note, I'm going to go over some shot cancellation specific weapon class benefits that are present in the Orbitar and Club class. Alright, so first up, clubs. While clubs don't have any form of continuous fire, they do have swing attacks that supposedly improve movement speed, but more importantly, these club swings are also capable of canceling out any enemy fire that comes into contact with them. Now, I would definitely not recommend using these swings against any shot that is extremely fast, like a staffed charged shot, for example. But if you're out of charge and you are faced with a slow-moving shot like an opposing club shot, you can use this club swing to your advantage to cancel it to save yourself at the last second if needed. And now, let's talk about the Orbitar class. The unique property of this class is that these weapons shoot 2 charged shots. Now, without the context of shot cancellation, you'd probably be left wondering what the benefit of this would be. So basically, with Orbitars, you can shift from an offensive playstyle to defensive playstyle very quickly. The Orbitar class generally have an amazing shielding option with backward dash charge shot, because on top of dealing heavy damage to anyone attempting to get close to you, this generally has great shot cancellation with the added benefit of having 2 projectiles to soak up most enemy fire, which keeps you safe when needed. You can go pretty crazy with these if you have quick charge equipped, so you can chain together backward dash charge shots to block shots in front of you, while also shooting out forward dash charge shots for offense. I kind of felt like I needed to slap on a tier list for this video just for the sake of doing it to better illustrate the hierarchy of shot cancellation. So just to clear things up, with the exception of Guardian Orbitars and Pudgy Palm being at the top of the tier list, the weapon icons on the list represent weapon classes, and specifically the most common shot cancellation value of forward dash charge shot. While this is a very weird way to make a list, forward dash charge shot is without a doubt the most commonly used charge shot in the game, as it's generally the most powerful range attack in your arsenal across weapon classes. I think this can give you a good idea of what you're up against without overloading you with information all at once. I did want to briefly mention that some items can actually cancel your shots as well, but I feel like if you're at the mercy of some of the more broken items, you're pretty much screwed anyways unless you got some powers to use for invincibility. That being said, I do want to bring to your attention some items that I think are quite useful. First up is the Centurion Assist. This item launches arrows at enemies nearby, which deal decent damage. These arrows also cancel out enemy fire as well. The Centurion Assist seemingly demolishes shots with a SC value of 4 with ease. Another thing as well that isn't relevant to shot cancellation, this item also has its own hurt box, so any nearby enemy attempting to melee you will most likely end up targeting this annoying fly of an item, which by the way doesn't disappear when you damage it, it only vanishes when the item runs out of time. So if you ever see a Centurion Assist lying on the floor, definitely pick it up, since it almost guarantees that you live longer than you would on your own. Next up is the Killer Eye. This is a turret that will rapidly fire at enemies in its line of sight. The Killer Eye can surprisingly cancel out shots super fast, which can be incredibly annoying if you're against it, as it's great for defense. In my opinion, the Killer Eye has the potential to be infinitely more annoying compared to the Centurion Assist when it's combined with the double item power. This allows you to place down 2 of these for double the fun. Next up is the Spiky Ball. This ball orbits your character and can deal damage to anyone close to you. This item also has the potential to destroy shots near you, similar to club weapon swings. And now for the honorable mentions, Demon Vine and Back Shield. The Demon Vine is a aerial denial that is perfect for defensive play, as it will deal strong knockback to enemies that attempt to move through it, while also blocking any shots that come into contact with it. Lastly, we have the Back Shield, which is self-explanatory. It protects your back from enemy fire, and in my experience also blocks melee attacks whenever it feels like it. Alright, so hopefully some of you are still awake at this point in my class. I figured this would be a great way to put most of the topics I've covered today into a small package, so I'll be doing a full breakdown of this match. Before we start, I do want to clarify that the main two weapons that are used in this match are the Angel Bow and the Gemini Orbitars. This match took place on public matchmaking, which is basically the Wild West and anything goes. Now with that out of the way, let's get started. So at match start, I activate Quick Charge, Homing Boost, and Slipshot. My opponent also activates Homing Boost and Slipshot. Slipshot, if you didn't know, allows our shots to pass through walls. The Homing Boost allows both of our weapons to loop. My Angel Bow backward dash charge shot is plus on cancel against their Gemini Orbitar forward dash charge shot, and they take a nasty hit. So now they're in trouble and respond with a Reflect Barrier, so they don't have to worry about me hitting them for a while. My bow has the Evasion plus 3 weapon modifier, so I'm free to dodge their incoming fire. I misplaced my shot, so it ends up cancelling through one of the Gemini shots, and also manages to collide with one of my previous shots that got reflected by the barrier, and still somehow kills my opponent. I don't know how. I hear the Geminis coming from my right just in time for me to dodge. I'm perfectly fine waiting for my opponent to run out of Slipshot and Reflect Barrier so I can hit them. And now it is my time to strike while they're distracted reapplying their powers. So unfortunately I just take a lethal hit because in my attempt to reposition myself I just left myself open. Too late. And I unfortunately dodged the wrong way, which left me wide open for the Geminis to swing back around and kill me. So now as the Angel, I'm granted the Fireworks Cannon, which is the fastest charging cannon in the class. I don't have any powers that grant me invincibility frames, and it's safer for me to assume that my cannon doesn't have any evasion modifiers on it, so my safe option is to use Cancellation as my form of defense. The Fireworks Cannon backward dash charge shot is plus on cancel versus Gemini Orbitar forward dash charge shot. One way I could lose this is if I kill them and they get back their powers, which unfortunately my teammate seems to want to do. So now I am on a timer. It's a really good thing my opponent was running Quick Charge on their power set at this point, since my Fireworks Cannon has a slightly shorter charge time, because I was out of Quick Charges at this point. Fortunately for me, my opponent tired out of stamina, so I capitalize on this so I can reduce their Angel's health a bit further, so I can maybe catch their Angel while they're in the process of being respawned. Dark Pit has the Magnus Club, which is an incredibly dangerous weapon to run into. Thanks to clubs having bad frame data on dash charge shot, I hit them before they can finish throwing out their attack. So now with the Geminis right in front of me again, I'm now pressured into cancelling those out. The Magnus Club standing charge shot is neutral on cancel versus my Fireworks Cannon backward dash charge shot, which if it landed would have definitely killed me from this range of health. With my shot now depleted, the Gemini orbs land a hit on me that knocked me off my feet. I used the get up attack to try and finish off the angel, which the angel dodges, but fortunately for me, the Geminis fail to dodge and both of them get caught in the blast radius, knocking both of them to the ground. So with Dark Pit in front of me, I use backward dash hard shot just in case they try to use another standing charge shot, but instead they go for a melee combo, which caused them to crash straight into my shot, which won me the game. Oh, buddy. Thank you, fireworks, for charging fast. I do want to add that my teammate that I had was actually not even playing the game at all. They're just like standing there the whole time. So during the match, I was under the assumption that they were still playing. So that definitely made that match way harder than it should have been. So now that I'm pretty much done explaining shot cancellation to the best of my current knowledge, there's still some things that confuse me about this mechanic, like if any weird interactions that happen because of latency, among other things. But I'll save that for another time when someone hopefully data mines the game. I have a feeling that this game probably has some hidden mechanic that prioritizes one player over the other, similar to Smash Bros. Melee with port priority, but that's probably me just overthinking it. This is without a doubt the most complex mechanic of this game just because there are so many variables that can go into this, but I'm confident that you'll be able to implement this into your gameplay because I have. This was originally going to be part of a larger video I had planned, but since this is going to be a mechanic I bring up in future videos, I figured this should be its own thing. I definitely struggled in trying to make this video as digestible as possible, so if you were able to follow along, I'd appreciate it if you would let me know down in the comment section, just so I can rest assured the headaches were worth it. Oh yeah, and before I end the video, I'd like to thank everyone for the 200 YouTube subs. I honestly thought that it wouldn't happen as fast as it did, just because not many people talk about this game very often. But yeah, I really do appreciate it, and I'll do my best to make some more videos for y'all to watch, so with that being said, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Some help. Jim, help me. Jim, help.
I'm in a chomp trap.
Jim, help.
Yo!
Jim, help.
I was being chomp.
Jim, help. Jim, help.
Fuck it up.
Help! Help! Help!
I tried warping so you put me in fucking Narnia.
It's good to know that chomp trap I put down came in handy.
Yeah, I literally dash charged